Although the first actual nuclear test was conducted in 1945, work on the project can actually be traced back to as early as 1933, when Jewish scientists that had a feeling that Hitler and the Nazis were just bad news for everyone left Germany to come to America. These scientists included Hans Bethe, Edward Teller, Leo Szilard, and that wacky-haired genius, Albert Einstein. Now let's fast forward a bit to 1938, when Leo Szilard heard the news that German scientists had managed to split uranium atoms, discovering nuclear fission. More importantly, it was discovered that nuclear fission released a very large amount of energy, and if that could be utilized in the form of a bomb, it would be curtains for America. So Szilard wrote a letter to President Roosevelt, urging him to have America build an atomic bomb before Germany could. Unfortunately for Szilard, he was just sort of a nobody outside of Germany, and therefore Roosevelt might not listen to his word alone. So he had the aforementioned Albert Einstein sign his letter as well. When the president read the letter, he immediately sprang into action and created the Advisory Committee on Uranium, the first step in the Manhattan Project. Although said committee did valuable research on uranium and the possibility of a nuclear bomb for 4 years, it realistically got almost nothing done in the way of actually designing one. In order for the nuclear bomb project to actually take off, something big would have to happen, and unfortunately for America, something big was right around the corner. We all know the speech. December 7th, 1941, a date which will live in infamy. Japanese forces surprise attacked the American Pacific Fleet in Pearl Harbor, bringing America into World War II. Immediately following Pearl Harbor, after the formal declarations of war, President Roosevelt fully endorsed production of a nuclear bomb and put the Army in charge of the operation. This operation, now codenamed the Manhattan Project, was headed on the military side by General Leslie R. Groves and on the scientific side by J. Robert Oppenheimer. And now, to make a long story short, the base of operations was in Los Alamos, New Mexico. The scientists had to live in seclusion and secrecy for 3 years there. There were 2 bomb designs, 1 plutonium implosion-type bomb and 1 uranium gun-type weapon. The President Roosevelt died on April 12, 1945. Harry S. Truman became vice president. Germany and Italy surrendered in early May 1945. The war in the Pacific raged on, so America still wanted to use the bombs on Japan. And America, unsure of the plutonium bomb, wanted to test one before dropping it. The big day finally arrived on July 16, 1945. The test, codenamed Trinity, was scheduled for 4 o'clock a.m., but due to a sudden storm, it had to be pushed back to 5:30 a.m. Finally, the weather cleared, and the countdown began at T-minus 20 minutes. Tensions were high as scientists had bet on how powerful the bomb would be, or if it would even work at all. If it worked, the world would never be the same, but if it failed, the scientists' work would have been for nothing. Once word of the successful test got to the president at the Potsdam Conference, he, along with other Allied leaders, declared an ultimatum for Japan to surrender unconditionally or be obliterated. Japan, still unaware of the existence of an atomic weapon, rejected the ultimatum, and so it was decided that American forces would drop atomic bombs on Japan's cities. First off was Hiroshima, and on August 6, 1945, the uranium gun-type device, codenamed Little Boy, was dropped over Hiroshima from the B-29 superfortress, the Enola Gay. The resulting explosion instantly killed approximately 70,000 people, and many more died in the following weeks from radiation. Still, Japan refused to surrender, and so on August 9, 1945, the B-29 superfortress Boxcar dropped the plutonium implosion device, codenamed Fat Man, over Nagasaki, Japan, killing slightly less than the amount killed in Hiroshima. Following Nagasaki, the Emperor called for an unconditional surrender, as he knew that Japan really didn't stand a chance against America's new terrible bombs. So yay, the war is over. This is where this story should end, right? Well, not exactly. America wanted to keep testing and advancing its nuclear arsenal. and that leads right into Operation Crossroads held at the Bikini Atoll. The reason for Crossroads was that the military wanted to see how well their ships and enemy ships would hold up to nuclear weapons, so they took a bunch of decommissioned American battleships and an aircraft carrier, along with some captured Japanese and German battleships, put them in an area in the southeast portion of the lagoon, and tested 2 nuclear weapons on them. The first test, codenamed Able, was an airburst of a Fat Man bomb. It went fairly well, as few ships were physically damaged. However, the ships were contaminated with deadly radiation. The second test, codenamed Baker, was far more interesting. This time, the bomb was suspended underwater, and the explosion caused a geyser-like effect. Aside from being unique to look at, Baker was much more damaging to the ships and lagoon than Able was. 10 ships were sunk during and immediately after the Baker test, and the lagoon was so contaminated that the Army had to wait a few days before they could get to the unsunken ships. Following the worldwide publicity of the Baker test, French swimwear designer Louis Rayard, I'm probably mispronouncing that, announced his new swimsuit, the Bikini. He had hoped for his new design to be as explosive as the explosions that rocked Bikini Atoll. This was the start of a culture shaped by the impact of atomic bombs. The military continued to test regular atomic bombs until Operation Greenhouse in 1951, when it was discovered that by injecting supercooled liquid hydrogen into the core of an atomic bomb, it would create nuclear fusion, which would boost the fission reaction, generating a much larger explosion. America was on its way to the hydrogen bomb. Operation Ivy in 1952 was the first test of a hydrogen bomb. Located on the small island of Elugelab in the Inuitak Atoll in the Marshall Islands, the bomb, codenamed Ivy Mike, was more of an entire building than it was deliverable bomb. The cryogenic equipment used to cool the hydrogen to a liquid took up so much space that the entire rig weighed about 62 tons. The explosion from Ivy Mike was so large that it completely vaporized the island of Elugelab which it was stationed on. After the success of Operation Ivy, there was another operation in New Mexico, codenamed Operation Upshot Knothole. The main test of this series, Grable, used the same type of bomb detonated over Hiroshima and tested the effects of a nuclear weapon on structures. The work of the United States thermonuclear program culminated in the spring of 1954 with the Bravo test of Operation Castle. The bomb utilized deuterium, a solid form of hydrogen, as its fuel source. This was much more efficient as it didn't require all of the cryogenic equipment. And also, as everyone there would learn, it wasn't just more efficient, it was also more powerful. Castle Bravo's yield was equivalent to 15 megatons of TNT, more than double the scientists' predictions. Apart from being so large that it blew over a lot of the equipment on the far side of the atoll and left a mile-wide crater, it also marks the second time that the United States had nuclearly screwed the Japanese. There was a Japanese fishing boat in the area, ironically called the Lucky Dragon No. 5, that didn't get the memo of the test, and also due to the explosion being much bigger than anticipated, the crew got a very large dose of radiation. Although the test was supposed to be secret, the word got out quickly of the United States' error with the magnitude of the test, and the dangers of nuclear testing were now in the public eye. This eventually led to the Partial Test Ban Treaty of 1963, banning all atmospheric and underwater nuclear detonations. Underground detonations were still A-OK though, and although they're slightly less cool to look at, things were still pretty interesting until the US completely stopped testing in 1992. Although the days of US nuclear testing are over, the impact they've had on the world will be remembered forever.